Hello everyone. I want to do a video on everybody, and it's an epidemic in today's world. Everybody is struggling increasingly with their weight, okay? Now, number one, in the COVID world, you can't get out and exercise as much as you can. You can still get out and walk, and the more you walk, it increases lymphatic drainage. Lymphatic drainage takes out the garbage, okay? It increases blood flow, which brings in the groceries to your cells. But people haven't been in the gyms as much. People have been at home. Food is more accessible. They're not occupied with their time as much, so maybe succumbing to food more so than they normally would. Maybe there are foods that you keep in your cabinets that you shouldn't, and you're succumbing to those. But it's a huge epidemic in today's world from early childhood, okay? And what it's called is metabolic syndrome, okay? Metabolic syndrome. And you should Google it and read about it because it's a huge, increasing worldwide problem. So number one, okay, it's a genetic issue to a certain extent. It's about toxicity to a certain extent. It's about the foods we eat to a certain extent because a lot of the foods are grown and things have estrogens in them. Some of the meats or chemicals that the body interprets as hormones. They're called hormone mimetic, okay? But that's not the only reason. The bottom line is, number one, and if you're a parent, when your child is growing up from early childhood, you should, the more they're active and exercise and get out and run and sweat, the more they don't grow fat. There's an old saying in medicine that fat begets fat, okay? In other words, you try to prevent it being produced early in childhood, okay? Even when you're pregnant, you try not to gain a lot of weight because you're putting more fat on the fetus, okay? And so you want to prevent that as much as possible. You want to do the healthy thing, but you don't want to gain a huge amount of weight, ideally, okay? It's why they monitor your blood sugar. It's why they monitor your thyroid when you're pregnant, because those things affect the amount of fat and a healthy pregnancy as well, and the child's brain, which is very important. And so the bottom line is, so you want to be active as a child. It prevents too much fat from being produced because getting rid of that fat in the future is very difficult, okay? One of the reasons that everybody's worried about people being overweight is because it increases your blood sugar. What happens to sugar? And it's why we worry and we say, you know, don't be eating too much sugar, don't be eating too much carbs, because what happens, and this is all about the why. As everybody knows, I'm all about the why. Why do you do something? Why do you not do something? And what do I do about the why? Okay, so sugar, when it's too high in your blood, or when you eat a bunch of sugar, especially before you go to bed, because you eat it before you go to bed, your blood sugar's high, but even all during the day, sugar becomes cholesterol or triglycerides, which becomes fat, okay? Your body doesn't like to have too high of a blood sugar, whether that sugar comes from sugar or it comes from carbs. Carbs do the same thing. Carbs become sugar, sugar becomes cholesterol, triglycerides, fat. So if you have high cholesterol or high triglycerides and you have the gene, or even you don't have the gene, but for whatever reason you find from blood work that it's higher, then you have to be very careful about the sugar and the carbs that you eat, okay? Because they all become fat. And so it's why ketogenic diets become high. You don't have to be a meat eater to do the ketogenic diet, but it's about protein, whether it be pea protein, plant protein, but protein increases your metabolic rate and helps burn fat as your body digests it. And so as you up your metabolic rate, whether that be from exercise, you exercise, it increases your metabolic rate. It burns fat. If you eat more protein, if you eat celery, for instance, it requires more energy to digest it. So it increases your metabolic rate. And that's why you eat raw vegetables to a certain extent. Increases your metabolic rate, helps burn fat. You don't make fat from doing those things, which is why I always talk about your diet should primarily be protein and green, okay? Green vegetables. I'm an eat right for your blood type person because I've found over the years that whether you have a skin condition, whether you have gas, bloating, constipation, diarrhea, eating right for your blood type will generally cure that to a large extent, at least 50%, okay? The other thing is if you have A blood type, you generally lack hydrochloric acid digestive enzymes, historically, genetically. You don't digest your food well. A blood type generally, historically, genetically has low thyroid, okay? So that's why I look at eat right for your blood type. So to go back to metabolic syndrome, as I digress. So metabolic syndrome, it's all about, number one, what you eat, being active, okay? Metabolic syndrome is genetics to a certain extent, okay? Women who have metabolic syndrome, they usually have lower testosterone, lower DHEA, okay, and higher progesterone. Higher estrogen, okay? Higher estrogen depresses your thyroid function. Higher estrogen depresses your thyroid function. If you're metabolic syndrome and you're a woman, you generally have higher estrogen, and then you have lower thyroid, and that makes you, it exacerbates, it makes worse your metabolic syndrome, okay? So people have metabolic syndrome have to, with apologies, I always say this because look, we all want comfort food and comfort in this life, but if you have metabolic syndrome, you can look at pictures of carbs and sweets to a certain extent, and they've done medical studies that showed that people's blood sugar goes up and they start making fat and cholesterol and triglycerides, okay, which is why, look, here's the facts. We've got to deal with the facts in this life. And so if genetically you then have higher estrogen and your thyroid's low, it's why I'm always looking. Look, is your tongue scalloped on the edge, which means that at the cellular level, your thyroid's low, which is why I care so much about your thyroid, okay? So what do you do if you have metabolic syndrome? Number one, you have to exercise more. Again, I apologize for that. None of us like to work ourselves to death, but at the end of the day, here's the facts, okay? And so in the vein of why do you have something, what do you do about the why? Here's the facts. You have to exercise more, and you have to exercise and sweat. You can't exercise and la-di-da, as I like to say. In other words, you can't walk down the street with your friend chit-chatting. You have got to exercise. You need to lift weights. You need to build muscle. You need to sweat more because it's hard to increase your metabolic rate if you have metabolic syndrome. And those people who always struggle with their weight have metabolic syndrome. Those people who have metabolic syndrome always generally have higher cholesterol and or higher triglycerides. So they need to have their blood work looked at, okay? And that needs to be treated appropriately, but don't make it by eating the carbs and the sweets. Now, it's not that you can never eat those carbs and sweets, but make it worth gaining some weight for. And remember, alcohol, wine is sugar. Again, I apologize when I say this. Alcohol, wine is sugar. The body converts it to sugar, then converts it to cholesterol, then converts it to triglyceride, then converts it to fat. So that has to be your dessert, okay? That you have to think about that. It's like trading cards in Weight Watchers. If you're going to do this, you can't do that. And so you have to, knowledge is power. So understanding these things helps you struggle less with your weight. Okay, now stress lowers your adrenals. Okay, the adrenal glands that sit on top of the kidneys, they lower your adrenals. That then lowers your thyroid. You lower your thyroid, that decreases your metabolic rate, which makes you struggle more. Okay, so stress not only increases aging, increases brown spots, increases skin conditions, but it also increases the adrenal problems, the thyroid problems, and metabolic syndrome. So what do we do about it? Because at the end of the day, that's what you care about, okay? So exercise, you are what you eat, food is your medicine. And then, look, I try to optimize your thyroid, optimize your adrenals. I try to optimize your hormones, okay? What do I do to lower your estrogen? Because estrogen is a generic term. It's really estradiol or estrone. So I give people estrogen support, which is on my website, which is, it lowers the estrone. Estrone increases your weight struggles. It also increases your risk of breast cancer. And so what does it come from? And it's all about foods. It's a concentrated dose of broccoli, cauliflower, bok choy, garlic, onions. So the more of that you eat, the better. Okay, but I have people who take estrogen support as well, and including men, because men, when they struggle with their weight, their estrogen and estrone goes up, and it increases problems with their prostate and the size of their prostate. So all those weight struggles, you see how it's all interrelated, okay? So estrogen support, I try to make your testosterone and your DHEA optimized, because that increases your metabolic rate to a certain extent. And so exercise increases your thyroid, it increases your testosterone, it increases your testosterone. But I'm always checking people's free testosterone, not total, but free testosterone. So all those blood worksheets are on the website, because all that is what helps increase your metabolic rate. The most important thing that you can do is your exercise, your food, keep your blood sugar low, okay? On the website, there's trichromium. Trichromium keeps you from craving sweets. It ups your metabolic rate to a certain extent, gives you a bit of energy. It lowers your glucose. If your sugar's not high, it can't turn to fat, okay? Jambola, same thing, lowers your sugar in a different way. I often put people on both of those depending on how bad their weight struggles are. So, but exercise is really the key, and understanding why you have this, and understand that it's genetic. Some people are just not meant to be stick thin. And look at your bones, okay? If you've got thicker bones, put your hand around your wrist. If you've got thicker bones, then you're not meant to be stick thin. So you have to come to peace psychologically with who you are genetically. We're all different. We're all meant to be different. We have to celebrate our differences and not stress about trying to be something that is just going to increase your stress, because some of us are meant to be voluptuous and some of us are meant to be stick thin. But it starts with you are what you eat. Food is your medicine, and understanding that exercise is key. And then there's certain tools that are on the website, and they're there for a reason, to help you cure the problem as much as scientifically we can cure it. Okay, thank you.